Welcome to the BlackJupiter. I'm the Agentist Random. As October comes to an end and everyone gets all spooky, it occurs to me that the scariest thing that I could experience is going another month without talking about ABC's Lost. You know Lost, that show about a plane that goes boom and the survivors do their best not to go dead. It's a show that everyone loved until they didn't. In the last video, I talked about how the episode about Nikki and Paolo was one of my favorites in the entire show, risking destroying my credibility amongst Lost fans. Today I want to even it all out and risk destroying my credibility amongst Lost anti-fans. Today I want to talk about why the show as a whole is the epitome of a chef's kiss. Of course.
I'm back.
Oh my gosh, Carson, where the freak have you been?
Space. Why do you have a hammer and a plank of wood?
Oh, trying to fix my window. This guy like smashed it in and started talking about set. Wait, hold up, did you actually get abducted by aliens? I was just kidding around when I told everybody that. I saw you disappeared from the basement like 40 days ago.
42.
Sorry?
42. It was 42 days ago, and yes, I was abducted by aliens. And I was told to give you this.
What is this?
It's Lost.
Nah, it's right there.
It's one of the best written shows of the mid-2000s, and I was told I could come home if I could get you to watch it.
Why do the aliens want me to watch a show?
Because the aliens have good taste. And you can too if you watch it.
Alright, sure. I'll try it. To begin, I want to give some extra context for how I watched the show. As I mentioned last time around, I only got into the show within the past year. I watched it all on Hulu, and if you're even remotely interested in the show, then I'm begging you, go and stream the show now. It is absolutely worth your time. If you're on the fence because you've heard some scary things, then stick around for a minute because maybe I can convince you otherwise. To put things at their most simple level, I enjoy Lost because Lost is a character-driven narrative. For those unfamiliar with the idea, a character-driven story is one in which the main focus is the development and choices of the characters. They often have larger casts, and the actions that they do is what forwards the plot most often. Character-driven narratives are typically in contrast to plot-driven narratives, which are exactly what they sound like. The story revolves around the next plot point or set piece instead of carrying a heavy character focus. That is not to say that plot-driven narratives don't often have good characters, and when I say Lost is character-driven, that is not to say that the plot isn't at all important in Lost. Far from it actually, the plot in Lost is famously dense and very complex. But at the heart of every part of the plot is some sort of character motivation. And that's why I find the characters to be the most important part of the show. This core idea was something that I found the show screaming at me from the first 8 minutes of the first episode. I could not stress this enough. If you really need a reason to watch this show, watch the first 8 minutes and it will speak for itself. But more on that in a minute. I'm sure that the scene where they first crash on the island has been talked about to death, but it really is a masterpiece of a scene. There is very little dialogue, and instead the viewer watches how this unfamiliar cast chooses to behave in a severely stressful situation. It teaches you so much about everyone and primes you to keep engaged with them for a good long while. It's a scene that tells me no matter what else is happening, the characters are the real core. Well, actually, the characters were the most important part of the show, for me. But I'm willing to wager that wasn't strictly how every single other person viewed the show. I'm sure everyone liked the characters and all, but I can't be sure it was everyone's primary motivator to come back week to week. When making a show like this, you need a way to really hook everyone in, and that's where one of the show's most famous elements comes in. It's mysteries and questions. This was an idea originated from one of its creators, J.J. Abrams, to get the show picked up in the first place. You see, the writers went out of their way to fill the pilot episode with a ton of mysteries and strange details anywhere that they could. There's a monster, there's a polar bear, magnets are weird, our survivors weren't actually the first survivors, Jack has tattoos! Now that's a gripping narrative. Today, these mysteries are one of the most criticized parts of the show, since some of the questions that I just mentioned don't get entirely explained until the show's epilogue. Just about anyone watching the show at some point felt like the writers were making things up as they went along. A large number of those people even still feel like that after finishing the show. But I can't think of a single time that I ever wound up getting that feeling in my viewing, and I attribute that to the pilot episode, which is called Pilot. I already said that I enjoyed the first scene, but the rest of the episode was just as instrumental to my long-term enjoyment. Whenever I watch anything, I immediately start analyzing its narrative structure, and part of that is understanding that the way a show opens ideally acts as a compass or tone setter for the rest of the show. And through this, I quickly learned how Lost's mysteries were going to work. I know I said some mysteries can take a lifetime and a half to answer, but Pilot also answers a fair amount of its own questions. Why does this guy have a vodka bottle? Who is this guy? Did one of them crash a plane? Where is the pilot? Are they getting rescued? One of them is a criminal. All of these questions are brought up in the episode itself and are answered within the episode itself. The first episode tells a complete story that just also happens to have several tons of loose threads to be explored throughout the entire rest of the show. This taught me as a first-time viewer that these writers are more than capable of basic setup and payoff, so it gave me a sense of trust. Until I was outright proven wrong, I would assume that the writers knew what they were doing. It also helped that I knew that the show was going to have a definitive ending and when that ending would be. I understand that's not something people watching the show back in the day had, but it is all the more reason to give the show a shot today. That said, that is not to say that the show is love at first sight for me. I love the opening scene, sure, but I still wasn't 100% fully invested yet, because there was one thing that I didn't quite entirely understand, and that was the flashbacks.
Are you ready?
Yeah, let's just get this over with.
You don't seem particularly excited.
You know, it's not the first time you showed me a show, is it? Remember the time you showed me Evangelion?
What, you want me to apologize to you a fourth time?
You also showed me Utopia?
Oh, come on. That wasn't that bad.
It just really wasn't for me, though.
Bro, come on. I showed you Kaguya, and you loved it. Have some faith in me.
That was pure dumb luck. A coincidence.
Never mistake coincidence for fate.
Who are you looking at?
Hey, you want a box?
Sure. Is the ancient book of prophecies inside? You're not gonna tell me, are you?
Play the episode.
Okay. Alright, I've gotta say it. That has to be one of the best openings to anything that I've ever seen.
See?
You know, you got me intrigued. I think I might actually like this show.
Each subsequent episode primarily takes advantage of a dual narrative structure. We primarily follow one character on the island and intercut into their story are flashbacks that show their time before the crash. This isn't so uncommon as a storytelling device, show don't tell. Instead of having a character exposition vomit their backstory to another character, let the audience watch their backstory. That way your exposition feels organic. That's a fairly basic idea that most shows understand, no problem here. Or at least that's how I viewed the flashbacks for the first couple episodes. I thought they were just a way to learn more information. Naturally, the flashbacks would have to end once they ran out out of characters, and that's when I'd imagine the plot would really get going. That's when they would focus in on answering some of those oh so important questions. But then I reached episode 6, The Moth, and my entire understanding was transformed! Without spoiling, this episode follows the character Charlie and shows how he was really struggling with something controlling his life before the crash. Unfortunately, it still has a chokehold on him after the crash, but we watch him grow and evolve like a moth.
Now, I could help it. Take my knife, gently widen the opening, and the moth would be free. But it would be too weak to survive.
And the writers intelligently used the flashbacks as steps to show that progression. They weren't there for exposition. The flashbacks were there to provide a thematic boost. That means that at its best, these flashbacks were almost like providing you with 2 great stories for the price of one, and that's just so cool. The flashbacks were the story just as much as what was happening on the island, because we watched the characters grow through viewing both the past and present. And since the story is so dependent on its characters, it allowed me to gain an appreciation for nearly all of the characters. They were the story. Even if watching Michael fight to get custody of his son had nothing to do with whatever Jack was up to at the moment, it still felt like it was the plot of the show to an equal degree, at least to me. After I finished the show, I was finally free to take a break from figuring out how many decks of Uno Rabla owned and could instead research Lost. I had watched everything this show had to offer in a bubble. Going in, I had never actually heard what the common consensus was, so I was a little surprised to find out that a show I saw as undeniably having some of the best writing I had ever seen was actually super divisive. How does that even happen? I mean, I know we're on www.theinternet.com, and as a result, people are just naturally going to disagree with each other, but I still struggle to see any major flaw with the show. Well, most of the complaints seem to circle around the ending. Don't worry, still not spoiling. But I will say that there was apparently a major misunderstanding with the ending itself. A lot of people seem to be under the assumption that the end of the show revealed that all of the plane crash survivors were in fact not survivors, and were dead all along after having died in the crash. I genuinely don't know how this became such a widespread idea. The ending definitely has interpretive elements, but that's not one of them. The show seems to know that exact idea of them all being dead the whole time was the most common and boring theory, so it literally has a line in the episode where they practically look into the camera and debunk it. So I found it a little ridiculous that this misconception caught on so much. If I was forced to place a guess, I'd say that this happened as a result of a lot of little things. One, the ending having some elements open to interpretation opened the door for people to draw conclusions leading to some possible snowballing. 2. The final credit sequence shows the empty set of the plane crash, which could be argued to imply that they never actually survived. But that imagery had nothing to do with the plot of the episode itself and was just there to serve as a good transition into the nightly news. Also, the writers didn't even intend for it to be there. Thirdly, and this is a very interesting one, people's expectations just seem to be off. Let me expand on that. I'm not saying that people's expectations were too high, I'm saying that they were in the wrong place. Remember how I said that the show's mysteries were used as a tool for audience engagement? Well, what happens when people are forced to wait like 6 years to finally get some of their answers? Speculation!
Nothing proves that you're the biggest fan of something in the room more than being able to explain how some arbitrary background detail plays into some deep-cut fan theory. If you've seen any of my World Ends With You content, then you know that can easily be me.
Where is the Shiki video?
Shut up!
But if it takes like 6 years for a show to finally put most of its cards on the table and people are left in that hyperfixation-induced speculation state for too long, I believe a show would start to become more about the mysteries and such instead of the actual story. So when the final episode rolls around and it's over an hour and a half long, but they're to spend that runtime on things like building a decent narrative structure and character catharsis instead of explaining some small strange detail from 4 seasons ago, ew, gross! Keep in mind, this phenomena that I'm speculating on isn't just a fault of the fans. I'd also blame the show's own marketing. Just look at this.
There are a lot of secrets around here.
On an island filled with mystery, nothing is secret.
Hey,
You gonna lie to me?
What?
I know about the food.
For very long.
This helped enable people to think that they should be watching the show for its mysteries. And while the mysteries are very important, they shouldn't be the sole focus, or you're just going to wind up disappointed. Because the show just isn't written in a way where you'll be satisfied if that's the core of where your care for the show lies. Finding out what's in the mystery box shouldn't come before telling a good, emotionally strong story. It would be silly to think that it ever should, and I think that the show would be severely worse if it did. And of course, this is not to say that speculation is bad, it really isn't. I'm just saying that over a long period of time, it, along with other little things that I mentioned, likely helped in creating a very bad public opinion. But if you're getting into the show today like I did, then that's going to be much less of an issue. You don't have to wait for the next episode if it's all on streaming, so even if you did wind up hyper-fixated like me, you're not likely to wind up speculating to that extreme of a degree. And you definitely won't find yourself knee-deep in marketing. This allows a show to speak for itself, and you're gonna get something really beautiful that way. You probably won't feel disappointed by the finale, and you won't be watching all of the previous episodes looking for something that isn't there. And by that I mean a show that only exists to give you mysteries and then solve them. There are a small number of mysteries in the show that are entirely left to interpretation, and a slightly larger amount that have concrete explanations, but are a little more underwhelming than might have been hoped. But at the end of the day, all of these plot elements are there to support the characters. And if it turns out that plot thread X actually wouldn't be super relevant to any remaining character arc, then why should it be focused on? The show was never about feeding your curiosity. That is not where the heart lies. I am not saying that the mysteries don't matter. Far from it. If you're going to get into the show for the first time, then buckle up. Those mysteries are something to be enjoyed. And if you're worried that you won't be able to sleep at night unless every single mystery is at least addressed by the show, then do not worry. Pretty much any answer does exist. If it's not in the show itself, it's probably in the epilogue released afterwards. The epilogue exists to house the resolutions to most of the loose threads that wouldn't really fit into the storyline of the ending. Like, there you go! If you need the answers, there they are! I stress on that so much because once that potential hurdle is overcome, it allows you to enjoy the best parts of the story. You can watch how the writers seem to be able to get the most random characters to have some of the most interesting character interactions. You can watch as they continue to permeate off of the basic flashback concept and create entirely new forms of dual narrative. You can watch it for Vincent! I mean, he's a very good boy, seems worth it to me. After all that, I hope you feel the show is at least worth a shot if you haven't given it one yet. Or maybe you felt let down by the show when you watched it way back when. Hopefully I've given you the spark to give it another chance. I promise, you'll find it a lot better now than you found it before.
Oh, and this is probably going to sound really weird, but if you haven't seen the show yet, then you should probably click off the video now. I don't know why, but I just have this feeling like if I were to suddenly have a flashback of some kind, it would probably have spoilers for the show's 4th season. So just throwing that out there. You've been warned. Pleasure having you here. Later. Alright, we all good now? Great.
We have to go back!
So what'd you think?
So this is after they get off the island.
A flash forward, yes.
Huh, you know, I was thinking it might be something like that. I was really hoping it wouldn't be a flash forward.
Really?
Yeah, this scene does worry me a little bit.
Wow, this is like one of the most iconic scenes in the whole show. The whole "we have to go back" line is super iconic.
It was a good scene, I guess, but flash forwards are a trope that I've never seen done super well. Like, you just kind of find out that all the characters don't die at the end, and then there go the stakes.
So you're not a fan?
I don't think so, no.
Huh. Well, I don't know if you like what happens next. Your takes are really weird. You like the Nikki and Paolo episode.
I'm sorry, it was peak.
Uh-huh.
Alright, whatever. If anyone can pull a flash forwards, it's a loss, guys. I still trust the writers. As long as we don't go, like, really deep into tropes in the next season, we should be good. Like, I don't want to see amnesia or something. Yes, this is a real thing that I am choosing to say to you before watching season 4 of Lost.
I don't know these people. What am I doing here? Who are you people? My friend is historian. I'm not your friend. I don't know you. I don't know you.
You know, I really like Desmond.
Oh my gosh, I love Desmond too! Special thanks to Bacon King, Kaiser, Nero Jacob Kuratama, Willpower784, Wonderland Snack, and The Missing Samurai for supporting us on Patreon.